Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be talking about some of the Pokemon that may be getting overlooked within the early stages of Pokemon Champions. As always, there are plenty of Pokemon that could have made this list, so let me know if you think I missed any of the major ones in the comment section down below. But with that, let's jump right into it. Kicking this list off, we have Mamoswine. And guys, it's crazy to me that I'm actually suggesting this because any other format, I don't think I'd ever be bringing up Mamoswine. However, right now, we have a limited pool of items, we have a limited pool of Pokemon, and Mamoswine checks a lot of boxes that you would want. It has a nice attack stat, it has some decent HP, obviously you're really using it for its offensive presence though, and that Ice Ground typing specifically, I think is really going to make it go. You're probably using moves like Icicle Crash and Earthquake are probably your two main ones. I believe you get high horsepower as well if you wanted to have a single target ground move, which is very, very strong as well. And you just have any coverage move, protect, tons of options when it comes to that to fit your team. But another big thing that it has outside of the really nice attack stat, it has Oblivious. It cannot get intimidated. And in a meta game where Incineroar in general swaps in and is able to live an Earthquake or a high horsepower because you're at -1, it can no longer do that, and I think that is very, very strong, right? Whether or not that allows you to just kill the instant that turn, kill the partner, preventing the Intimidate is huge, and it's one of the big things we saw with the lack of Clear Amulet. Intimidate is getting back, and it's becoming stronger than ever. So you definitely want to look at that, and then you also get a really cool move pool of items, right? I think Choice Scarf is probably the best one, but once again, if you want to deal with some of those mediocre defenses, you have Focus Sash. I don't know why Leftovers and Mental Herb are considered popular here. I'm not a fan of either of them. I would stick to one of these first two. Most certainly Scarf is probably going to be the best set in my opinion, just because you get the speed tier that allows you to do things, right? Choice Scarf Mamoswine, goodbye Gengar. Choice Scarf Mamoswine, goodbye Garchomp. Of course, if they are Scarf, you don't quite kill the Garchomp because they get to go first, but you're not going to die and then you kill them back after that. So it's really not too big of a deal. So that's really nice. And then, of course, you get just really good coverage, right? One of the big issues with ground types is, you know, they send an Earthquake and a flying type hits the board and they all of a sudden, you know, they have to pivot out or they have to use a non-stab Rock Slide. And that doesn't really hit very hard. So the Icicle Crash covers that super, super nicely. And it's just a really consistent Earthquake spammer. Especially if you have a Choice Scarf, right? You can run a Rock move probably to help deal with Charizard. I don't know what you'd get. I think you get Rock Slide. Surely you get Rock Slide, right? Yeah. Surely you get a Rock move to deal with Charizard, right? Which is also super nice as well. And then you just get to pair this the normal way you would build a Garchomp team. And it's effectively running a Garchomp with a Garchomp that beats a Garchomp. So you're running a Garchomp that is just beating opposing Garchomps, and it's effectively going to help you in that mirror matchup as well, right? So you close this out, you probably can go, you know, your own Incineroar, right? Maybe a Rotom, right? You would probably run this on like a relatively standard-ish team, at least to start, I would find. Surely you can run it elsewhere as well, but my specialty is in that standard style team, right? Now you got Instant Mamoswine, you have Fake Out Big Damage if you want, you have Intimidate to help Mamoswine's defenses out, you can now Earthquake beside the Rotom because, you know, you have Levitate over here and you get Electric Ice coverage as well. I think that's probably the key right there. You probably want that Electric Ice coverage, which is very good. And then you also have the Earthquake. This right here seems really, really strong to me. Definitely something I would look at going forward in this meta because Mamoswine, it's a threat, guys, and I think people are definitely not paying enough attention to it. The next Pokemon that I think always ends up making these lists, every time I do one of these lists, I feel like I'm adding Serena. And it's just genuinely such a good Pokemon when it comes to stats and ability that I'm surprised it doesn't, you know, get used more often, especially in these lower power formats, right? Shutting down priority, fantastic. And now that we don't really have like a psychic terrain setter in the format, shutting down priority with an ability becomes even more valuable, right? We see Farigiraf get usage, so why can't we do the same thing with Serena? One of Serena's major issues is probably accuracy, so not having wide lens does hurt, right? However, you used to have to really run Power Whip to get the damage output. However, they gave Trop Kick a nice little stat boost this time, and instead of being base 80, it's now base 85. And now you have an 100% move that drops attack, which in a low power format, you don't need to be, dropping base 120 power whips. You can choose to if you want, but now you have a nice consistent grass move that you can add to your move pool. And I think that is very, very valuable going forward in this format. Of course, you get insane coverage, right? You get stuff like triple axle. I believe you get high jump kick to be able to kill off the King Gambits, right? And now that we have a format where you cannot terrestrialize and just get yourself out of a bad typing, I think Serena has a potential, right? Like Garchomp, sorry, goodbye, I have triple axle. Rotom Wash, goodbye, I have drop kick. T-Tar, drop kick. T-Tar, high jump kick, right? This hits, drop kick, triple axle, high jump kick hits like 90% of the metagame for super effective damage. And when I can do that and have Queenly Majesty, meaning I can't get prioritized, like no one can use a priority move against me, this seems way too good to not try to run, right? Your stat line, it's not horrid, right? Like obviously your speed is probably your biggest issue, right? But base 120 attack is really, really solid. You probably want to pair this with some sort of Tailwind option. Probably want either Talonflame. I think you would go Talonflame just because I think double grass in this format with a Whimsicott is a little odd, right? I don't know if I'd really want double grass in like a Charizard and a Gengar format. So you'd probably want to go with your next best priority Tailwind setter in Talonflame. You could easily maybe use like Aerodactyl as well if you're not worried about like priority Tailwind, but I definitely think you want to pair this Serena with Tailwind, and then you can just get 3 turns of Tailwind and they can't use priority moves and you start sending things. And honestly, just the spread coverage alone, just the spread of potential moves you have is enough to make this Pokemon good, and Queenly Majesty I think is just an added bonus. I think people are going to start using this more and more as the format develops. And why not jump? Why not be ahead of the trend, right? I do think Serena is very, very good. Aerodactyl I'm a little less sold on. Obviously very good, not on this list. But basically, long story short, Serena plus Tailwind I think is going to be very, very good. Alternatively, you do have a lower speed stat. So in theory, you could try to get like Serena plus Trick Room. But I feel like if you're going to do that, you might as well just use Farigiraf rather than having to need a Trick Room setter and Serena. You have, just the Giraffe, because then you have your Trick Room setter and your priority block. But Serena, of course, very, very strong option and an interesting grass type in a format where I feel like there's not that many good grass types. You don't have Wide Lens. That's the issue, right? You can do Choice Scarf if you want. You can put a Focus Sash on it if you want. There's tons of options. You can probably put one of the super effective moves, like an Expert Belt if you want. Okay, is Expert Belt in the game? It might not be. I don't think it is. It is not. Anyways, but you can probably put like, if you want to boost your grass move, you can go with like a Miracle Seed. You can go with the moves that just boost, or the items that boost individual stats just to help you with that extra damage output. Because 120 is good, but you're probably getting intimidated a lot. As I said with the Mamoswine, you're going to get intimidated, right? Mamoswine obviously can't. Serena can, which is probably one of the reasons it's not seeing too much. But overall, Serena, good Pokemon. Definitely try it out. Next up on this list is a Pokemon that kind of took the world by storm when it came out back in like 2017. So yes, I'm dating myself once again. But, however, then it got nerfed. And that nerf was huge. That nerf was very drastic for it, right? They took the Disguise ability and they said, well, now you're losing 1/8 of your HP every time that Disguise breaks, which broke one of the fundamental cores of Mimikyu. What was so strong was you used to be able to run Focus Sash, and they would have to break the Disguise, they would hit the Mimikyu again, and because you have a Focus Sash, you would just be able to live any combination of double ups. And that was so broken when it was coming time to set Trick Room. You don't have that anymore. But what you do have is a format that's a lot lower powered. Disguise, of course, still taking that 1/8 of your health. But overall, the format is a lot slower paced. It's a lot more difficult to send big damaging attacks into this Mimikyu. So if you can play this properly, you can get around Taunt by holding a Mental Herb. And you become all of a sudden an incredibly consistent Trick Room setter, right? If I just pair this with Fake Out, let's just say Incineroar, since it's the one at the top of my mind right now, right? You pair Mimikyu with Fake Out. You are getting Trick Room up. Probably 99.999% of the time, if you want Trick Room, you are going to get Trick Room, right? By having Fake Out, you click fake out, and they can't stop you because you have your disguise ability. So you're gonna get a guaranteed turn to attack. They can't taunt you because you have a mental herb. Their best chance of getting to stop Trick Room at that point is either to flinch you or to have some sort of priority block. And I think when it comes to Trick Room, especially right now in the metagame, it's a matter of finding ways to get Trick Room up. There's a lot of Pokemon with taunt. There's a lot of Pokemon, that can just double up into things and get kills, or just hit you very hard. Like if I have a giraffe, right? Maybe my giraffe goes down to like a bug buzz or something from a Volcarona. Not that Volcarona is common, but Mimikyu can't die in one hit, and I think that's really where it serves as that next level piece. And of course, then you just get cool moves, right? You get stuff like Shadow Sneak, which I think is very good. Obviously, Shadow Claw as well, right? You get Play Rough, which is unfortunately a necessary evil in my opinion. Play Rough sucks, okay? It's a very good move, but it's got to be one of the moves I miss the most. So it's really annoying to run. So outside of that, that's probably one of the bigger issues. But you get, like I said, Trick Room yourself, which you definitely probably want to be going for. You can Swords Dance if you want, right? And you can all of a sudden turn your Mimikyu into a setup piece, right? You don't need Mental Herb. What if you just went Life Orb? Okay, sorry, we don't have Life Orb, my bad. But, what if you just went like Spell Tag or some sort of damage boosting item, right? And then all of a sudden, you become a threat. You don't need to set Trick Room if you don't want to. You can go Play Rough, Shadow Sneak, Swords Dance, Protect if you really wanted to. Whoops. Right? There's just so many different options with Mimikyu. And having that disguise ability now, once again, in a lower powered format, gives you a lot more opportunity for Mimikyu to set up what it wants to set up. And I think that is absolutely massive. Obviously, guys, your stat line, it's nothing special. But overall, I really do think there's a niche here. Probably your best bet is to be in Trick Room. So you want to be that Trick Room setter. Like I said, you're going to get Trick Room up 90% of the time. In fact, you technically don't even need to have Fake Out. You could just have Trick Room and send it. Because, like I said, there's a lot of double ups that just aren't going to be able to get you. Because normally, the double ups in this format tend to try to do 50% into a 50%. But that's not going to work against Mimikyu unless they have something that's really going to destroy you after they break the disguise. Like they do a Rock Slide Chip, and then they hit you with an Iron Head from King Gambit, right? That's probably one of the bigger things that I would have to worry about with Mimikyu. But overall, you have 5 other slots to find a way to get around that one option, right? One of the most consistent Trick Room setters in the game right now. And honestly, I think it's being slept on. I know Trick Room hasn't really seen its usage yet. There's always that one Trick Room team, and everybody's kind of struggling with Trick Room right now because we don't have the 0 IVs anymore. Everything is locked in at max speed. So that does become a problem for Trick Room. However, I think it is still very consistent, and I could definitely see a world where Mimikyu starts creeping into the metagame. Moving on, we have Tinkaton, and guys, Tinkaton may just be here strictly because of how good Floette is going to be. Tinkaton has some defenses. It's absolutely nothing crazy. Obviously, the stats aren't amazing. But with the special defense stat, with being a Steel Fairy type, specifically Steel Fairy, there's a lot of potential for Tinkaton, right? You obviously have Gigaton Hammer for massive damage and the ability to one-shot Floette. Being able to remove Mega Floette is very, very nice. You're able to 1v1 to Mega Floette. It's a little weird because they can protect off the Gigaton Hammer, which is why it's probably not seeing more play, right? Because you can only use Gigaton Hammer once, and then you have to wait for a turn before you can use Gigaton Hammer again. So if they get every call right with Protect, they can get through the Gigaton Hammer, which does get a little bit annoying in terms of matching up 1v1 versus Floette. But overall, you also have a other cool thing called Mold Breaker. And of course, being able to attack through abilities. So I think one of the big things for that is actually Fake Out. I think Fake Out Mold Breaker is very, very strong because, well, if they have something like Farigiraf on the field, you can Fake Out with just ignoring the ability of Farigiraf. So that Fake Out will still go off and still flinch that Pokemon. And all of a sudden, Farigiraf's main potential is gone, right? So obviously there was some other cool things back in the day where you could Encore into Good as Gold Goldengo as well. Obviously that's not relevant for this format. However, Encore, still a very solid support option, right? Tons of options for Tinkaton to excel, but like I said, this was a little bit more of a wild card, and if I'm being honest, I kind of just needed something to put in the thumbnail. But honestly, I truly do think that the Gigaton Hammer as a nice little answer to Floette is very, very good, as well as just some of the other tools it gets to be annoying to other teams. Like Fake Out's very good, Encore's very good. And then of course you can probably run you could run White Herb if you wanted to. Choice Scarf is probably a terrible idea. Did you get Ironhead? I was going to say, if you get Ironhead, you could do some really cool consistency things there, where it's like you don't necessarily need Gigaton Hammer, but you probably want Gigaton Hammer. It's still by far your best move. And of course, Play Rough, once again, in a format where fairies are going to be good. Play Rough is going to be strong. It's going to be able to help hit that Garchomp. I don't think you're killing it, unfortunately, and that's really where Tinkaton falls, in my opinion, is you have some cool support, you have some cool options, right? And once you're not clicking Gigaton Hammer, what are we doing to really advance board state? Base 75 attack is unfortunately not that great. There might be a cool world where, you know, you can get some like cool skill swap shenanigans, but that's not consistent, and I'm more focused on consistency here right now. I'm not sure if Tinkaton can be consistent. I don't know. I have hopes for Tinkaton. Okay, I think there's a chance here. Item wise, I mean, Focus Sash is good. Citrus Berry is probably fine, depending on how much damage you're really willing to take from like +1 Moonblast from the Floette. I know you take the Moonblast no problem, but after a few of them start stacking up, right? Like, how many times do you want to get the Gigaton Hammer call wrong, right? It's not really consistent, and that's the main issue with it. But White Herb is another option as well. You could go Shuka Berry as well for the ground resist if you chose to. Lots of cool items to use for this piece. Once again, probably I don't want to say the worst Pokemon on this list, but definitely the lesser viable, the lesser consistent wise. Least consistent, that's the word I'm looking for. The least consistent one on this list, but definitely could still see a few, some nice usage moving forward. I think there's definitely potential for Tinkaton. Moving on, we have the last two Pokemon here, guys. I'm going to kind of include them together, and one's going to kind of swing into the other. And they're both going to be Steel types. One's going to be Aegislash, and I'll spoil the next one now. It is going to be Scizor. And it's just, we are looking for Steel types that are actually Steel types right now. And what you have right now is you have a lot of things that resist Floette, or the typings that resist Floette are paired with typings that no longer resist Floette, right? You have Sneasler, which is great. It's Dire Claw, but it also is attached to that fighting type. So Floette still hits it pretty hard. You have King Gambit, which is great. It hits it hard with Iron Head, but it's attached to that dark type. Aegislash is kind of that piece that does indeed sit in front of Floette, and more importantly, sits in front of Sneasler as well. So two phenomenal Pokemon that you are just allowed to say you no longer care about. And that is huge. You get stuff like Leftovers, I think is very, very good for Aegislash. Citrus Berry as well. You could probably do some cool things with like White Herb or Mental Herb. Tons of different options. You could probably go Spell Tag as well. But long story short, one of the big things I like about Aegislash is how it's able to be a defensive piece and an offensive piece as you wish, right? You need to run King Shield as your protecting option. And then you get to choose if you want to go physical or special. Both the attack and special attack end up being the same. Anyways, we'll get into that in a minute. And if you go special, you get a lot of cool things. You get Flash Cannon, you get Shadow Ball. And that's just consistent damage across the board. That feels very, very strong into the meta right now. And then, of course, you just have another slot. Back in the day, it used to be like a substitute, right? But you also get a nice little boost. They gave you access to a lot of moves on the physical side, which is really, really cool right now, which is why I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. You have Iron Head, you have Gyro Ball if you want, but not being able to go min speed kind of sucks. So we'll stick with Iron Head for right now. You get Close Combat now as well. You get Poltergeist, which is a move you never got back in the day, right? So you get a lot of cool little buffs to Aegislash, and with King Shield, you're able to do a lot of cool things, right? So look at this attack stat, look at the special attack stat, it looks like it sucks. However, the stance change ability when paired with King Shield is absolutely disgusting, because what it does is when you use an attack, you switch to attack form Aegislash, and your defenses and your attacks switch. So you actually end up with 140 attack, 140 special attack. Unfortunately, 50s in defenses, but the one key thing about Aegislash is you're slow. right? You are probably being the last Pokemon to move that turn. And you want to be the last Pokemon to move that turn. Because what you get to do is you get to take all the hits with your defenses, move last, get big 140 offense off, right? And then King Shield next turn, go back into the defensive form, get your stats back, and put up a King Shield. If they attack into the King Shield, the physical attackers and the one moves that make contact get a -1 attack stat, right? It used to actually be -2 back in the day, but they did nerf that, unfortunately. The defenses also used to be 150. But that's besides the point. Once again, just dating myself here. But overall, I think Aegislash is a really, really cool and consistent Pokemon, just because it's able to be defensive with King Shield and just in this defensive form. And then when it needs to go on the offense, it's hitting you hard with stuff like Iron Head, which is incredibly strong, Poltergeist, which is incredibly strong, Close Combat, which is incredibly strong tech move. I mean, you can run Sacred Sword as well, I believe, which arguably is better if you don't want to drop the defenses. But either way, both are definitely viable options. You got a lot of cool support moves as well. I believe you get Wide Guard, which is something I haven't even brought up yet. But you do get Wide Guard. You're worried about Earthquake? Nope. Well, I'm just going to have Wide Guard, right? Like, you can go King Shield, Iron Head, Poltergeist, Wide Guard. You don't need to have the coverage move, right? Tons of different options. You get access to Shadow Sneak as well because, like I said, yeah, you're slow. But maybe you want to just all of a sudden pick off a Focus Sash. Well, there's your Shadow Sneak. Really, really cool move pool. Really fantastic typing for the metagame right now. The big thing you have to worry about is stuff like the major dark types like King Gambit and Incineroar. But once again, if you maybe pair this with your own Sneasler, right? If I could type, that would be great. You pair this with your own Sneasler. Now, all of a sudden, King Gambit doesn't want to be here. Right? Incineroar really doesn't want to be here because chances are this is going to be White Herb. Could still be Sash. You don't necessarily need White Herb, but it's an option, right? And all of a sudden, you've built this core now. You do have to get her out of the ground stuff, which is definitely what you do in the next 4 slots. But however, you know what I mean? You can start pairing things off with this Aegislash so to take care of those dark types. And this is a problem. This is a Pokemon that does not go down very easily. And it is very, very strong. In fact, it's so defensive. It used to run weakness policy back in the day. Obviously not currently in the game. But overall, I think it's a very bulky Pokemon. You can abuse that. And Steel Ghost is actually really strong typing in this metagame right now. We saw it work for Goldengo for 4 or 5 years. It's Scarlet and Violet. It's Aegislash's time now that Goldengo is not here. And like I said, I did spoiler Scizor, guys. It is, I think, super strong. I think it's really, really cool. And I think it's better than the Mega Evolution, strictly because you get similar stuff from the Mega when it's not Mega, right? Yeah, you get a little bit less of an attack stat, but at least you get to hold an item and you get to do some cool, you get to do all the same things with an item, and yeah, a little bit less attack, right? But maybe you just put White Herb and now you don't care about getting intimidated, right? White Herb is all of a sudden went from this like small niche item to this really incredible item, and it's really really versatile as well because you can kind of put it anywhere. You know, we're seeing it on like Shell Smash users to get rid of the defense drops. We're seeing it on physical attackers just to get, you know, that burst damage off, right? Like if you're worried about an Incineroar switching in, well, you have White Herb now, right? Obviously, you're probably losing to Incin anyways to a Flare Blitz. However, unless you could pair it on Rain, right? So all of a sudden, like I said in yesterday's video, Rain is looking for a reason to be good right now. Scizor might help that. Once again, you could easily run to Mega Scizor. Guys, you could easily run to Scissorite here, and it would be a very serviceable piece. I'm going to refrain from that. I do have a video coming out later in the week about the underrated Megas. Not sure if Scizor is going to be there, but I wanted to keep Megas off of this list. Overall, Technician is a very, very strong ability. You're probably looking at something like Bullet Punch. Do you want a Bug move? You probably do. You can go Bug Bite is really, really cool. Do you still get U-Turn? You do still get U-Turn. Both are very strong options. Bug Bite is nice if you're staying on the field. There's a lot of berries as well. So stealing their berry and eating it is very, very funny. So like maybe, you know, you Bug Bite a Rotom Wash and you're eating a citrus berry. You get health back now. And it gets Technician boosted because it is only base 60. So it does now become base 90, which is very, very nice for that. But you get U-Turn as well. You get cool coverage as well. You get stuff like Acrobatics, Dual Wing Beat, and Flying coverage is always super, super nice to see. I believe you get access to Superpower as well if you're looking for a reason to start hitting, like I said, those King Gambits, as I was talking about before. And once again, just the Bullet Punch is very, very nice in the Floette. strictly off the fact that, well, if you can get some chip damage on Floette and then have Scizor in, the Floette is now useless. You are fully preventing this thing from moving. Unfortunately, unless they're beside like a Serena or a Farigiraf that's going to stop this priority, your Bullet Punch is a huge, huge threat. You have the ability to Swords Dance as well if you choose, right? Like you're able to go maybe Bullet Punch, Swords Dance, get a nice little item in here. I don't know what you would use. You could go Leftovers or Citrus Berry if you chose, right? Because the power of this format is so low, you have opportunities to set up Swords Dance. You have opportunities to support yourself, whether you're using Rain to hinder fire attacks, whether you're going to have a redirector, whether you're going to have a fake out user. There are opportunities for Pokemon like Scizor to set up in this format. And it doesn't matter that it's slow because Bullet Punch is hitting just as hard as if it was a fast Pokemon. Obviously, it only goes to like base 60 and it's not the craziest stat boost. So you may want to have like Bullet Punch, Sword Dance, right? Maybe you want to have an Iron Head anyways for more consistent damage overall. However, that's something you can, test out and feel like if you need it. Overall, I mean, you have base 130 attack stat. You're hitting things really, really hard. And the typing is nice. Steel is such a good typing. And I think there's a lot of steel types that aren't being seen. That's why there's a lot of steel types on this list, guys. But overall, I mean, Scizor seems like it probably has a lot of potential. Once again, the Mega, of course, very good. Just really quickly for comparison, guys. Just really quickly, right? Like, yes, you get a nice little attack boost, right? From base 130 to 150. But like I said, maybe the item can offset that, which is why I wasn't necessarily trying to refer to Scizor here. You get a lot more bulk, though, on the Scizor. So that's definitely maybe a good reason to use the Mega one. I'm not saying don't use the Mega one, but I'm saying, you can use the regular Scizor and still have the Mega slot available to you, right? You can just run Scizor, have the Mega Stone as well, and only Mega it when you need to. You can still have another Mega. But I think there is a world where maybe, Scizor, I don't know if Gengar is correct, but you want to put you want to use one of the bigger, better Megas. It could be Gengar. It could be, I think Charizard would be odd, but it could be your own Floette, and then Scizor's your Floette answer, right? Like you could go Floette here maybe, right? Delete the Pelipper real quick, right? You could go Floette, and all of a sudden, let's go Instant, right? Like we start building this core, right? You go Instant Floette, and you have a great piece right here, but then you also have this secondary mode that, oh, well, you have your own Floette team. I'm going to leverage my Scizor instead, right? So I think Scizor definitely has a niche right now. Once again, guys, I think a lot of these Pokemon on this list, they're obviously not being used for reasons, right? So they all do kind of have those setbacks. However, when it comes down to it at the end of the day, I think there is a lot of room for these niche Pokemon to find spots in the metagame. They may not be like, oh my goodness, Scizor is now a top 5 Pokemon, but there's definitely a world where Scizor is a good Pokemon and it might fit exactly what your team is missing. So that is going to wrap up this list for today, guys. Once again, I'll probably be able to do a part 2 of these. Of this list, there is so many Pokemon when it comes to that are underrated that might serve these like small niches as the metagame develops. So probably doing a part 2 probably early next week as well, or at some point when I figure out what the next set of 6 is going to be. But that is going to do it for this list, guys. If you guys do enjoy this type of content, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel, and of course I really do appreciate it. But with that, I'm going to get out of here, and I will catch you all in a future video.